I'll stall so Marty can think of one. But hello,
Marty coming in
everyone.
hot.
Welcome to episode 28 of the Senteon and CIS webinar series, a deep dive into the CIS benchmarks. 28 episodes. Let's see. We're going on 4 months of this, Rich. How you feeling?
Love it.
I think we've nailed down the
Yes.
format. I'd like to think we've had
I'm
a
ready
good
to go
audience.
twice a week, bro. I don't think the audience is ready for that, though.
Right.
Speaking of twice a week, I'll kick off the episode plugging Senteon and Fifth Wall Solutions. We are going to be talking about CIS and cyber insurance. Do they play nice together? Is there a relationship, or are they two completely different things? I'll be joined by Will Brooks tomorrow, so that'll be another fun one.
So on that topic, are you going to bring the speed to keep everybody awake?
Oh, man, you don't need it. Everyone's excited for that one. The registration list.
Excited for cyber insurance. Yes.
You say so, Zach.
I mean, the pens are just waiting to check marks and boxes. I heard that's all it takes. No, I love it. So excited to do that tomorrow with Fifth Wall, Will Brooks. It should be a great discussion. I did drop the link into the comments on that. But today we have Marty Godsey coming back, CEO and founder of Rudio. He's been in the space for a couple decades at this point, and is really, through and through an entrepreneur like us in this room. So really appreciate you having us, joining us on the show again, Marty. We're excited to dive into some of these more. I don't know, would you call them IT management? I mean, still security focused, but these are a lot of resource settings, right?
Yeah, they're. I'd say more of resource management. Topics of always on and what constitutes that, and what does that bring to? What kind of risk factors does that bring when it is always on, especially when it's a device that's not in a protected environment, inside an office building.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. So we'll be diving into that. I think we have about a dozen settings today to cover. But before we get into that, I always like to bring up some hot topics and things that are coming up in the market today. And one of the things, I'll drop a link, but we were talking about Homeland Security and the role of DHS in implementing an AI executive order. So AI is everywhere nowadays. It's going to replace all of us. The shortage in jobs in cybersecurity, it's not a concern anymore. AI is going to replace everything. I don't know how true that is. But Marty, I wanted to just give a broad range. Have you been following AI? Is this something that you actually have looked into, and what's its role in cybersecurity from your point of view?
I kind of have. I mean, in a way, kind of all jokes aside a little bit, AI kind of scares me a little bit. Actually, it scares me a lot. And it's just really because of the power of it. We can say the Skynet jokes all day long and say the Terminator's coming. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's such an extremely powerful tool that is only going to get better. It's already gotten extremely better. And all that's going to do, it's going to be a tool for both the good and the bad. The Axis and the Allies. It's going to be a tool for both. And so that means, it's good, but it scares me in the long run because of the power of it. I mean, as a quick example, I'll make the joke kind of nice. My wife's a pharmacist. She's pediatric pharmacy, and she came home the other day and she says, "Well, I met a new guy. His name is Clyde." And I'm like, "You left me for a Clyde?" But what it was Clyde AI, and what she's using it for is she works at a teaching hospital with University of Kentucky, and so whenever they're working with a student, they come up with topics for journals and things like that, and she just plugged in to this Clyde AI. I want 5 journal topics that deals with this and this and this and this, and they're
in an instant.
In an instant. Now she still reviews it and looks it over and stuff, but the thing is it reduced the amount of work she had to do by 80%.
Can't complain about that, right?
Can't complain about that. But
then productivity.
Exactly. Great productivity. And so that's where I think AI can be good. But then now look at that from a standpoint of a bad actor and what they're wanting to do.
Right.
Now their efficiency can go up 80%.
Right.
So
targeting attacks and, refining phishing and whaling attacks and all that stuff, AI really makes possible. And CIS just participated in the recent AWS conference, and AI was a huge buzz at that event, with AWS making some big announcements around generative AI tools on the AWS platform. And I think we'll see all kinds of new things coming out of that tooling that AWS is providing within their platform, which is exciting. Here at CIS, we're trying to figure out, how to approach AI, how do we use it, how do we protect our constituents, if that's the appropriate word, the people that are Secure Suite members, how do we advise them around AI? And we're trying to figure that out. And fortunately, we have some really smart people like Kathy Moriarty, who is our chief technical officer, and she's working on those plans now. So I'm curious to see what CIS does with Kathy leading the charge here at CIS. It'll be interesting to see what we put out as IP.
That's actually interesting. You bring that up, Rich, and I know this is kind of a new area, so I'm not going to ask you to talk towards it. But CIS it will likely have a role in helping create recommendations around AI. Is that what you're saying?
That is our intention. I probably speaking out of school already, so I don't believe that there's any timelines or stuff like. We understand the risks and the rewards of AI, and we're trying to figure out how do we kind of balance the scales and take the best gains from AI while protecting our customers from the inherent risks that the bad guys can leverage from AI tooling as well.
Yeah. And I think it goes into, Zach, and into your point too there, Rich, is having those protections, because let's look at the two things that are really emerging these days. You've got AI and you got quantum computing, right? Those are two very big things. There can be amazing tools, and for a lot of different platforms. But when it comes to the most immediate threat, quantum computing obviously is definitely going to be an issue, going to be a problem. But the access to quantum computing right now is rather limited. It either takes a whole lot of money, or even when you do, it's a whole lot of money. It takes more money to access that type of compute power. And whereas AI, you can go to OpenAI and get a limited account for free. And even its power as a limited account, the V3 version, I think it is very nice. And if you do want to pay,
the model, it's not bad at all.
Exactly. And if you do want to pay a little bit of money, you can now get the V4. And so I think it's just the accessibility of the AI is so much easier than it's quantum. Quantum is going to be its own problem when it gets here. For encryption and different things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, AI definitely is. That's why I said, I guess, at the beginning is it kind of scares me to see what's going to happen with AI from the standpoint, from an IT security mindset.
Well, Zach's sitting out at Stanford, so you probably know the quantum side, right, bro?
I could probably talk to some of the researchers directly and get a little testimonial on what's going on. But now that's really interesting, especially from the attacker point of view, quantum computing. Kind of talking about, Marty, you always seem very in tune with new technologies, security vendors. I mean, you obviously are one of our partners, right, over at Senteon. We're an innovative early solution, and you took the time to learn about us. Kind of tying together vendors and AI. Do you believe, to be a successful security vendor, even is AI going to be integrated with every new security venture coming out and start to integrate with the existing ones, if not already has?
Oh, absolutely. More and more security companies are either A, developing a product that has AI components, or B, finding a way to integrate AI into their existing component. It's here. It's going to be here for a long time, and it's going to be a very integral part of any.
It's a matter of the tooling becoming ubiquitous.
Exactly.
The tooling's becoming easier to work with and generally available. So that really fosters that innovation in terms of adding AI into existing tech, as well as brand new offerings.
Yeah. Well, even look at who we use for our stack when it comes to our SOC, that we utilize. We use Blumera, and you've probably heard of Blumera. Yep. And one of the things about Blumera is it's very, it has some AI driven tools behind it. That's kind of their thing. Is there's going to be very few SOCs out there that's going to have somebody looking at your stuff 24/7. They're relying on alerts. They're relying on a system to go through, parse, and send them alerts, so then they can then turn around and look at your system.
Honestly, that's what you want, though, right, Marty?
Exactly. Absolutely, you do. Because if you have somebody staring at your stuff all day long, which is not going to happen unless you hire somebody to do it.
It's not a happy employee, for starters.
Not a happy employee. And plus, two, they're never going to be able to process as many things that are going to come from all your systems as fast as as an AI. We'll just
No,
specify
they
it as
still
an
need
AI.
coffee and bathroom breaks and maybe a pizza once in a while. So
Exactly
bots
right.
don't need that.
No, exactly. So no,
Bring back pizza parties. I think
Bring back
that's the
pizza.
takeaway from this episode this week.
or the programmers, you just said you just slide some pizza and some Jolt Cola underneath the door and let them have fun. But
Well, you add a few bots and you can have more pizza.
and you can have more pizza, right? But yeah, it really is. It's something like you're saying, Zach. It's already integrated, and then there are a lot of companies out there that are kind of coming to light now that are saying, hey, we are completely AI driven.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the cloud applications a long time ago, cloud native, built on the cloud. Now we're getting kind of AI native, built on AI kind of apps.
Absolutely.
That's awesome input on that, and I have a cat jumping on my table, so we'll distract
it. Actually, where my office is, we're putting some barn doors to cover my office door because it's big. But until then, I bought me a big room divider that I now put in front of it, or I would have my cat here too. So
and they don't jump over it.
Cat people on this show.
Well, it's if she can jump over that, then she can be in here because it's like 6.5 foot tall. And
I'll toss Bruno on camera for this next kind of topic I wanted to go into. So, the whole point of the CIS benchmarks are these security recommendations, a lot of the times, at least for Windows machines, in the form of GPOs, right? Legacy technology, group policies always been around. You can do some in Intune, group policy directly, or solutions like Senteon or other third-party security configuration tools. In the MSP market, I feel like the security configuration management just kind of falls on the engineer. But as businesses start to grow, and maybe that MSP gets to the point where they do have a IT service department and then security service department, how do you think businesses should start handling these security GPOs? Because what I've seen is typically they're an IT responsibility, but these are security function GPOs we're talking about with CIS. So is that a working relationship between the two departments? Does security need to start to take over some? What's your point of view on that?
It has to be a symbiotic relationship because they fundamentally have two different missions, really, when you think about it. The mission of IT, just IT in general, workstation, desktop, whatever, is their customer is the user. And then their product is whatever application that user is trying to use and to do their job. So their responsibility is to make sure that application is available and able to be used by that user. That's their job. Now, obviously, you got some crossover. They need to be secure and stuff like that. But for the most part, that's their role, is making sure the users can get the applications that they need to get to do their job and be productive. On the flip side of that, you have the security team. Okay, they could care less to a degree whether or not that application is easy to use. Their concern is protecting that data and protecting it from being compromised, stolen, ransomed, whatever the case may be. So it's two different missions, but ultimately they lead to the same goal, and that is accessible, usable applications and data by a user that is secure and protected from bad actors.
Misuse, even. It doesn't have to be bad actors. It's just misuse of the approved software.
Exactly right. And so it's two teams, but they have to work together. Now, of course, the question is, well, how do they work together? Do you have IT does X and then, the security team does Y? Well, yes and no, because it's one of those things that a lot of these settings, as we're talking about here, Zach, and you mentioned, these are more IT settings. You got to have all the permissions to be able to make these changes, or tools, access to tools to make these changes. And you also have to know what kind of impact on whatever application that they're using that these security changes are going to do. So there's a whole lot of intermingling that has to happen. Still two different teams, but a lot of intermingling. So it definitely is
orchestration of sorts.
It very much orchestrated. It has to be orchestrated. And then now when you get into orchestration, you get into the question of, okay, well, where does the buck stop? Whenever we have a decision to make, which way is it going to be taken? Because we all know in this call, and we've seen this, that security and ease of use are like this. If it's easier to use, it's going to be less secure. If it's more secure, then it's going to be harder to use, and your users are going to get pissed off, right? And you got to find that where's that happy medium. And the only way that but you still have to have someone that says, okay, we're making, this is where the buck stops. We're taking this approach. And many times, and it should be a security focused approach. It's like, okay, we have two paths we can go here. One is more easier for the users, but it increases our risk and a risk level. Or the other way is, okay, the user has to log in again somewhere, but it really, it decreases our risk factor by quite a bit.
And Marty, I know you are an expert in these matters, but what we talk, what Zach and I talk about a lot of times is first off, understanding that risk and what you're trying to protect.
Yep.
And then if you do have to, point the needle more towards easy access, build defense in depth around those that information that you need protecting. So it's one way of kind of tipping the needle without affecting the user so much, by just building extra layers of defense around privileged information that is contained in the organization.
Exactly right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask. So I'm gonna plug something Matt Lee's doing right now in the background. So Matt Lee has been calling out vendors, practitioners, anyone who's interested to get involved with a CIS working group, is what he's calling it. And the end goal is ultimately to help vendors aligned to CIS, saying, hey, the Senteon solution, validated, confirmed by this community, meets safeguard 4.1, right? That's the end goal. But there's a lot going into this. And combined with your answer to that and what I did this morning with them, it makes me realize, I guess I'll just ask the questions. Security teams are going to know CIS. If you're in security, you're likely 90+% you're going to know CIS. What about these IT teams? They may not even know what CIS is. So how is that security team supposed to say, hey, we need to configure it this way because CIS says so? I feel like that's a massive challenge. And where it gets even more interesting is, I think MSPs have the advantage here, because IT is security, because they're not large enough a lot of the time to have separate teams. So they can kind of enforce the standard while doing the IT responsibility. Maybe I'm just giving my opinion here and going on a rant. I don't know if there's a question, but
I think you're onto good points there, Zach. But it clearly varies by organization.
Mm-hmm.
And just enabling that. So if you're talking about an IT organization that includes security, those you're talking about generally an understaffed environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they need tooling. They need tooling to make their jobs easier and to protect the environment appropriately. And that's really where the Center for Internet Security, providing guidance through the controls framework and then configuration guidance through the CIS benchmarks, are really a security professional's best friend. Layering on top of that tools like Senteon that really help push out those settings and validate your configurations and manage drift is all critical to basic cyber hygiene. And if you miss along the way, just by a little bit, the bad guys might get in. Because we talked about in the last episode and Zach corrected me. What's the number one attack vector, Zach?
Default configurations.
Yeah.
Just to wrap up this topic here, you mentioned I'll call it a buzzword, but cyber hygiene. That's very much a word used in today's vocabulary. Is cyber hygiene the IT department's responsibility?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think it's a team effort, number one, ultimately. But because, again, different missions, at the end of the day, that help desk guy, Betsy calls and she can't print. We're going printers again. We love them. She calls and she can't print. Well, his entire purpose is to get it to where Betsy can print now.
Mm-hmm.
But, he goes, okay, well, just let me open these ports and do this and open that for you. Okay, you can print. Thanks, Betsy. See you later. But what he's inadvertently done, he's now opened the front door for
attack surface is now larger.
Yeah. And so that's where I think it has to, there has to be a working together, but I think it needs to start at security. It has to start at security to go, okay, here is your box, Mr. IT, here is your box. And I use box metaphorically. Here are your guidelines and your guardrails. You can do anything you want to do in that box. But I have to work with you, Mr. IT, to determine how big that box needs to be and how many doors and windows I need to add to it.
I like that, Marty.
Yeah. But so,
And
and
Marty,
then,
your help desk example, I mean, that was the exact attack vector for the MGM breach, which cost millions,
Mhm.
over 100, like $150 million. And
Yeah.
that was the exact attack breach where someone calling into the help desk, presumably to get help, stole credentials and caused about $150 million of damage.
Exactly. And so yeah, it has to be a team effort, but I think it has to start with the security team. The security
I
team
like
has
the
to
team
become
effort. It also needs to be a continuous effort.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yep.
Awesome to hear. All right, the one thing before we get into these settings, because it ties right in. So as a quick refresher, a lot of these settings we're going to be talking about is just power management, remote assistance, user profiles, and a lot of like Microsoft data gathering settings, or they want the data, right? So we brought up this concept of always on before going into today's episode. Just kind of talk about what that means and your point of view, because a lot of times end users, they're not turning off these machines. Everything's always on. Everything's always connected. What's your point of view on this?
Yeah. It goes a long way because, for years we've always said, leave your computer on. We do maintenance at night and we do, we do all this at night. And there's still validity in that. Not going to gather at, but now we have, and it's kind of like the perimeter, 15 years ago, the perimeter was your firewall, and anything past that firewall was considered trusted and anything outside of it was considered untrusted. I mean, you can still see that in some firewalls these days. I think SonicWall still calls them trusted and untrusted zones, right? But really, there's no perimeter. Your perimeter is your computer. That's your perimeter, and even to some regards, the perimeter is the application, right? And so when it comes to always on, I think it's becoming more and more of a challenge because we still need to do our maintenance. MSPs need to do their maintenance programs. We don't want to interrupt the user. Now we're going into convenience versus secure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to interrupt the user. But then again, too, if you leave the machine on, depending upon where that machine is, you could be exposing it or keeping it exposed to an attack surface that is not healthy for it. And so I think it's going to be something that's going to have to be individual. When I say individualized, is it's going to be very circumstantial and very situational. Not circumstantial, but very situational. And it have to
have to have some kind of balance that works for the organization from a policy standpoint, because you can't leave that stuff unpatched.
Cannot leave it unpatched.
That's rule number one. Well, not exactly one, but it's
Well, you can't leave it patched, but like laptops, for example. Laptops are remote users. We have a larger client of ours that has a mixture of laptops that are out in the field, and then we also have a remote, an RDS server that people who don't have company laptops, they remote into an RDS server, via zero trust network. It's not exposed. So those are easier. They're always on, blah, blah, blah. Just because it's an RDS server, it's there. But now these laptops could be in a coffee shop. It could be at home. It can be anywhere. Mm-hmm. Am I going to ask that user to keep them on at 2:00 in the morning so I can patch? No, I'm not. It's going to be available during the day, and that's it. And then I have to worry about, well, where are they? Are they sitting at a Starbucks on a wireless and they think they're on Starbucks wireless, but they're not. They're on some guy's hotspot, and he's seeing all the packets going back, back and forth. And so I know we'll get into this, a little bit with the questioning today, but it talks about, like with something that's always on, even if you have a zero trust agent or if you have a VPN or whatever the case may be, it says, oh, well, there's a VPN, they're safe. Well, do you always on? Do you require that user to log into that VPN, or whenever they open their laptop and get a network connection, does it just connect and they're on the network? So there's a whole lot of considerations there to where even a VPN or a ZTN connection is still increasing that that surface.
It's not easy, Marty.
It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right?
All right. And speaking of today's topic, let's go ahead and get into it. If we can pull up the first slide here. So want to talk about we're going to be going over a lot of these individual settings from the CIS benchmarks, which are designed to be proactive and mitigate the risk of various MITRE attack techniques, but overall reduce the attack surface. So I just listed out, 6 topics. MITRE attack techniques are in some of them, but the one interesting one on here is power management security, right? That to me, that's not security. What's the risk of a bad actor messing with my battery,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
I mean, could you talk about that one specifically and call out a few of these as well, if you don't mind,
I'm sorry,
Marty?
the others. What's that?
Just whichever ones you're
Yeah.
feeling today.
So the power management, you're exactly right. We think, oh, how is that an issue? Really, it comes down to the power management is again going to the always on. Do you leave a laptop if it says, okay, I want to shut down my screen? Oh, let's look at, for example, Macs. We'll just do Mac specifically because I know they have this ability. I can shut my laptop down. It goes into standby, but it leaves the NIC active. And so it still has processes that are listening that if it gets a certain, a signal, if it gets a request coming in,
Sure.
it will wake up the computer, do what it needs to do, and go back to sleep. That's cool. It's cool. But now I have a laptop sitting out there, and again, I'm at a Starbucks or I'm somewhere, and it's an actively listening process that's on a public Wi-Fi. Regardless if it's a CTN or not, it's a NIC that is still actively listening for something coming in, which means if there's any type of exposure there from an unpatched system or whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
well, there you go. I'm sitting here wide open. So I think the power management security goes into that is, okay, do you, yeah, we joke about, oh, how are they going to mess with my battery? But it's really not about messing with your battery. It's about messing with, well, how does your device function when it's in what's considered power saving mode? What are we going to do?
That's really good. The other one on, I mean, there's a few. We could talk about a handful. I mean, we could talk about all these if we wanted, but remote exploitation mitigation. Me and Rich talked about this the other week, I think with David, right? Microsoft wants to have a lot of access. They want to ingest, some of these, hey, troubleshoot logs, right? And they just by default have the ability to gather these. And I think there is some built-in RDP settings we'll talk about today that Microsoft can leverage. But, could you talk about why we maybe don't, even if it is a trusted source like Microsoft, but maybe don't need to allow this exploit from being available?
As far as the remote exploitation, yeah, it goes into the same thing about you never know where things are going to be, even internally. Again, I'm not really talking about internal too much today because you can put other safeguards in place. A lot of this, in my opinion, comes from the fact of remote workers and people who have devices outside of a, quote, trusted environment. And every time a patch comes along, you're looking at the remote execution, the remote exploitation mitigation. That's really what we're trying to protect is because, you mentioned, Rich, about somebody got credentials for the MGM, and that was the attack vector. Well, that wasn't a remote exploitation. That was a social engineering.
Yes.
But when it comes to the remote exploitation, well, now it's like, okay, well, what do they need to do? Do they need to have credentials already? Which it could, again, just like we have defense in depth, the bad actors out there has attacks in depth. It's the same principle.
Right on.
I like
Yeah.
that. I've never heard that term.
Yeah, it's attacks in depth.
No.
Oh, okay, I do this, and then I do this, then I do this. And once I get all three of these, and then I'm here.
It's a prescriptive model, right?
Exactly, and very much so. And so, making sure that any type of remote execution patch is done, I think, is very critical, which it typically is. Even if the patch says there has to be authenticated user. Okay, even that is not an issue these days because, again, go back to the MGM. Hey, I'm an authenticated user. I just logged in with a username and password that I got from somewhere. So now you can say,
I'm a known user.
Yeah, I'm a known user. And so yeah, it's definitely it's part of it has to become overall. And I see you got network time protocol there. Same thing. NTP is critical when it comes to Kerberos tickets, VPN tickets, any type of authentication. If you can manipulate that to not being in sync with other devices or other systems that it works with, well, then there could be flaws out there. We're doing a little hypothetical here a little bit, but there could be flaws out there that are based upon it being in sync with a particular type of system. Because if it's using timestamps, well, then the timestamps are going to be off. It may not think anything is wrong. Here's a good example. We talked about this one week. Logons. Okay.
Yep, I remember that.
Hey, I know that Marty's not supposed to be working at 2:00 in the morning because he works Monday through Friday. And why is he logging in at 2 a.m.? But, if I can manipulate the NTP to where the time is now back to a certain point, well, when I go to log in at 2 a.m., it may log it as 2:30 in the afternoon on a Friday.
Nice. Yeah.
Well, you know,
I think that's a great hypothetical, and we'll get into the exact settings that are going to mitigate the risk. So Rich, I'll give you a highlight so we can go to this next slide here. But really brief as always. We're here every week to talk about the CIS benchmarks in 30, 45 seconds. Rich, give us the quick overview. What are the CIS benchmarks?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I mean, this is my favorite slide generally because the answer never changes. So the CIS benchmarks are a prescriptive guide to setting up your baseline settings correctly. So CIS, we make recommendations on proper configuration settings. They're contained in our PDF files that we make available generally for everyone to consume. And, if you follow the CIS benchmark settings, and we're going to go through a few of them now, you are setting yourself up for success because you are configuring your systems to mitigate all of those common MITRE attack vector points in your environment.
Spot on. All right. And with that, let's go into some of these settings. The first one here is going to be allow network connectivity during connected standby on battery is set to disabled. So if I'm understanding this correctly, this is when it's in standby mode. The machine is black, right? It's timed out, but it still is CIS recommends not to allow the network connectivity. Is that understanding it correctly?
Yeah, it's basically during connected standby on battery. Yes, if it's on battery and it goes into standby, correct. It's standby is not hibernate. It's still running, but it shuts down the monitor, it shuts down things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And on battery, that means it's plugged in.
No,
do you know
it's on battery means it's not plugged in.
Okay. Yep. And as we see on the slide, why this matters. There is the security benefit, but again, this is extending that battery time, making sure it has a longer life and isn't using resources unnecessarily.
No, because batteries are good these days. These LiPo batteries out there, they're great. They don't get memories, but they do lose their charge over time. I have a friend of mine that has an iPhone, and this is no joke, an iPhone 8 or 9. Yeah.
Oh no!
I'm like, dude, I'll buy you a new phone for Christmas.
That can't run current OSs.
He cannot, no. But he's like, yeah. He says, I just haven't gotten one. His battery life, the max charge he can get is like 35%.
Yeah.
So
not usable.
Yeah, he has a battery pack. And you've seen those battery packs you plug phones in?
Yeah, he has to keep that on full
That's
time.
his battery, pretty much. Is that battery pack?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
No. Awesome. And a few of these settings they're going to sound pretty repetitive, so we won't spend too much time on them. But let's go to this next one here. So this is the one I should have been more clear on. So same type of setting, but allowing the network connectivity during standby, but also plugged in. The granularity and the minor differences here. I mean, the devil's in the details, right? But anything you want to add to this? I'm effectively the same, but plugged in.
It's the same, yeah, same setting, but plugged in. Thank you, Microsoft, and all your double negatives.
Yep. All right, let's go ahead and go over to this next one. There's no need to expand more on that, but allow standby states S1 to S3 when sleeping on batteries, also set to disabled. Anything you want to share on this one?
A lot of these as we're going through, and you mentioned it, Zach, at the very beginning, are a lot of but pretty much the same concept, just different states of power management. You got standby, you got sleep, and you got hibernate. Typically hibernate, there's nothing you can really do because hibernate truly turns off everything. But in sleeping and standby, you still are having processes that are running and still taking up memory. And there's another key too, taking up memory, which means they're keeping things in memory. Go to exploits that are from a memory standpoint. Really just the same thing as over. And it's just a good idea just to disable those. It's like, look, if I'm in standby or I'm sleeping, just turn off my NIC. I don't want to hear anything, see anything.
There's zero effect on the user, so
Absolutely.
Why not, right?
Absolutely.
That's the other big thing, right? A lot of these CIS benchmarks, they may not be right for you because it could cause disruption to internal workflows or employee behavior, and they just don't want to deal with it. These ones here, employee's not on the machine, the monitor's not visible.
Exactly. I'm sitting here, at Taco Bell eating a taco. My laptop's back at home. I'm not using it. Turn it off.
Yep.
Sorry, I left it open, right? I didn't mean to leave my screen
You're
open,
not
but it
inconveniencing
locked,
the
it
user.
hibernated.
You're just closing a door.
Yep.
Yep. All right, same type of setting, but just to show the slide again, I put a lot of work in these, so let's put it on. Same type of thing,
golly.
right? S1S. Yeah, I actually did start doing that. It's quite amazing.
Sweet graphics, Zach.
Yeah, I like that one. I think that's my favorite
I
one.
know.
It almost looks like the moon is holding the plug. Almost.
The moon's the outlet. I'm not.
Yes.
But yep. So same type of thing. So again, we're just maintaining that battery life and taking care of it. So let's just go on to the next one here.
Because a lot of these batteries in laptops are actually non-replaceable. These are not non-replaceable. I mean,
I think non-replaceable is a fine word to use. I've looked into it before. It's a pain.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few out there now that primarily the business laptops have it where you removable batteries and stuff. But I mean, my son has one. It's like a 3 or 4 year old Dell. The battery is non-removable. You know, if you got to replace the battery,
my
you have
MacBook Air. You can't really crack those open too easy.
No, not at all.
Not by yourself, anyway.
All right, another one that has to do with battery usage, but a little bit more in tune with the security side of things. So this is calling out to require a password when a computer wakes while it's just on battery, and CIS says, yes, absolutely do that. Why is this important, Marty?
Well, it goes into, you could have, depending upon other settings that require, like session timeout settings and things like that. If you don't have those set, well, then this is yet again defense, in depth. This is another layer that will come when it comes up. You still have to type a password. It may not be an MFA password, but at least it's something that you have to type in to get access to your session. So if you've went through and you've forgotten to set your session details to where, hey, whenever my session is so long idle to require reauthentication, it's just another layer to kind of add on top of that.
Yep.
What's interesting, we talk about defense in depth, and you brought up a new term, attacking in depth, right? If you do have a different one of those settings hardened and the attacker finds a way to go around it or even change that configuration state, now they have to do it again because there was a fail-safe configuration hardened, and they have to continue through that process. Because something I say all the time is CIS Benchmarks is mitigating you from those easy attack paths. You're making things harder on the attacker, making yourself less vulnerable of a target, right? They have to invest time and effort, which attackers don't want to do, right? They want the easy ones.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, Rich, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Marty.
I was just saying, you were asking earlier, Zach, about the CIS controls and things like that. I mean, you said this word earlier, and I've heard it too, is I think CIS controls is just good cyber hygiene, period. I think at a very bare minimum, you should be implementing the CIS controls, a bare minimum. And of course, this goes into that. So.
Rich, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, and I love that, Marty. Thank you. You're one of my favorite people. Anyways, no, I was just going to add, and it's less important than what Marty contributes is, with this particular setting, let's say we're working in an office environment I'm working in a conference room and I just close my laptop screen and walk away. And, Zach could come into the conference room, flip the laptop open and have access if this is, without having a credential requirement. And we don't want that.
No, especially too, depending upon how you have your settings. Because if you don't have your settings on your laptop to lock your workstation when you close the lid, then you're just closing the lid. It's going to turn off the screen, but you're still up and running. You open it back up. Same principle goes into when you have docking stations. That's how you use it as, and I call it clamshell mode. I got 2 monitors here. I bring my Mac, I plug it in, I plug in the cable into my docking station. I shut my laptop and I'm looking at you guys here. Same thing true for a PC too. To your point, Rich, if you don't have those additional settings to go, hey, when I close my lid, log my session out or do X, Y, Z, well, then Zach can come up behind you and flip it open, and there's your session.
Yep.
And one thing we did get a comment in there, if we can highlight that in the background, from Gary Traverson. He was asking, I think Rich might have said this too, but 2-factor authentication, would that mitigate the need for this setting or override this setting, right? Would 2FA still play a role? And I think the answer is and I'll let you answer it, but that's the defense in depth we're talking about. If you don't have one, at least you still have the other. But anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think it goes compared, because let's look at for example, this we have we have a medical firm that uses us, And for their laptops, they have an app gate. We use app gate for our zero trust. That's all we use. We have an app gate connection. And then they, of course, but their machines are not part of the domain. We use Senteon to actually manage those machines from a GPO level because they're separated at all times. So we still get that GPO type control with, but using Senteon to do that. But we require them to take a step further, since they're not on the domain, there's no central server. It's all local passwords, local everything, but they have to do Duo MFA to log in. Well, now let's take it a step further. They actually have to do it twice. So they have to log into their laptop with two-factor authentication. Then they have to log into the zero trust with two-factor authentication. And some people go, well, number one, why don't you just do single sign-on? I'm not a big fan of single sign-on from a security standpoint, in my opinion. But one reason we do that is to this point here about having, and to the gentleman's point about MFA, it definitely should be a factor. You should have it be MFA, because what if, even if I'm not on the ZTN, let's say that we have the zero trust network set to disconnect upon standby. Okay, that's good. Well, what files does that user have on that laptop, which could potentially contain sensitive data? We don't know. Great, the laptop's encrypted. So if he runs off with it and can't get into it, and he takes the hard drive out, he can't see the data. But if I can get access to an active session, well, it's being encrypted in real time. It's not encrypted at that point to me as a user, as the attacker. So having MFA for this functionality, I think, is also something that can be used and would use if you have the ability to, because you don't know what's on that laptop or that remote device.
Marty, question.
Yep.
You're talking about a process that includes two MFA gates, if you will. Do you get pushback from users on that?
I get a little bit. We've had a little bit, but we've kind of explained to them the reasons why, and we still get some that'll kind of grumble and walk off. But at the end of the day, it literally is inconveniencing them 5 to 10 seconds. That's it.
Right.
But it's reducing that attack probability and that attack surface by hundreds of percent, not hundreds, but by a lot.
A lot.
And so we have had pushback on it, but we've had.
And your approach is just education. Explain to them why it's important.
100% educate. Well, two things: education and management support.
I was going to say you need a sponsor for that.
Yeah, if you don't have management support, then of course, because at the end of the day, that CEO or CTO or CISO, the user's going to go to their manager's going to come to them, going, "Oh, this is a bunch of BS that I have to log in twice," and then all of a sudden, the CISO or CTO go, "Okay, well, we'll go ahead and change this," and all while us as their security provider sitting here going, "You do realize what you're doing here? We're trading." We're trading we're trading Texas for Maryland here, okay, from a land area standpoint.
Marty, let me ask one more question, because I know we're getting on time, and Zach is giving me the evil eye already. Zach, or Marty, you mentioned you're not a huge fan of single sign-on, and Okta's been in the news a lot lately in a variety of attack vectors that they have allowed access to many networks in recent times.
Yep.
Why don't you like single sign-on?
I don't like single sign-on because it makes it just see where are my words there. As much as it makes it easier for the user to access their applications without having to authenticate multiple times, it also provides that same ease of use for any attacker.
It's a centralized identity.
It's centralized identity to where
you
go
get
here.
Credentials, and you got the keys. One set of credentials gives you access to many things.
To many things. Correct. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest reason I'm not a big fan of it. Is it convenient? Absolutely. Do I love to use it when I can and where I can? Absolutely. But from a security standpoint, in my opinion, it's a huge hole. Because you're to your point, you have a set of credentials. Like, oh, you just go here, and we validate this in the background. I was like, okay, well,
it's not a zero trust kind of thing, though, is it?
Not at all. If I have a compromised device, okay, you're validating my device, you're validating this, you're validating that. But what if I'm actually that bad actor?
Right.
I get in one time, I'm done. So that's why
you get pushed right through all the other gates.
Yep.
All the other doors.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And I do appreciate Rich's question about pushback on MFA. I think Felicia had a strong opinion on this when she was a guest on the show. It's Rich, you might be able to correct me on this, but she said this is like a HR responsibility, right? It needs to come from the resources team to talk to the employees and like, hey, this is actually needed as part of your role. This is a security documentation. This is part of your job to follow. Thought that was an interesting point of view.
Straight up corporate policy.
Yep.
Yeah, gonna have to,
and that's why you have to have support from the top down. It's that simple.
Yeah. All right, let's go into this next setting. Another kind of regurgitated one, but this is the same setting, just while plugged in. So let's go ahead and. Do you have anything to add on this one before we go to the next?
No, same thing, just plugged in versus not.
Yep, exactly.
The dual plug, Zach.
Yeah.
It's super creative.
Is one European and one American?
No.
Yeah, you can see how one's filled in. That's actually a different voltage it can accept. You didn't notice that?
Do you need an adapter?
No, I didn't.
For that? Do you need an adapter?
All right. That's enough image talk. Let's go to the next setting. All right. Configure offer remote assistance is set to disabled. So Marty, who is this talking towards? Is this the MSP trying to remote in through GPO? Is this Microsoft? Could you talk about this setting?
It's Microsoft, and it's also whoever you provide that remote assistance number to, because this is something that's been in Microsoft for a number of years now. Is it convenient? It is convenient, because whenever my mother has an issue with her computer, she can go, hey, here's this number. Can you go and do this? But again, it goes back to it's convenient, and it's a way that it's yet another attack vector that can happen for somebody, because again, now going to social engineering. I call you up, or and say, hey, I'm from your antivirus company. I'm from this and this and this, and on your remote assistance, just do this, and they have access to it. And so having it just disabled just gets rid of it. Let's not even worry about this. Why do you need it? There are hundreds of other ways for MSPs to securely remotely access your computer than using that setting.
I like that. And let's bring up the next slide because it's in the same vein while I ask this question. But we talk about it's more secure to have this disabled. Absolutely agree. No disagreements. There's more secure ways to do this. But if you did need to use this, should it be available, right? With your exception tracking process, is it that big of a deal to just kick this on the one time you needed it, right? I guess my question is leading at how big of a deal is it to change a config temporarily? Is that an acceptable workflow, or should these be disabled forever, no exceptions ever?
Well, I think it comes into how you manage your client. I think if these are one-off clients, then sure, turn it on, get some assist that person however you want to and however you need to. But then, of course, explain to them, hey, once we're done here, please turn this back off.
And that's okay, right? You document it. Ideally, you have a solution, plug myself, like Senteon, that documented that change, but you do have your own internal review approval processes, right? Exactly. So I love that answer. Going to this next setting, the one before this was the offer of remote assistance. And this is another layer. Sorry, go back a slide for that. This is actually allowing it to happen, right? It's not actually offering it. This is allowing it. Anything you want to add to this one?
No, it's really the same thing as before. This is a doorway into your house, and you need just like your house, your door at your real house. Would you just leave it open, or give somebody the key to say, hey, come in whenever you want to? It's not. So same principle. They go hand in hand. If you want to use it, but just be sure and turn it off once you're done.
Yep. Awesome. We'll go into some of these more RPC settings here. So enable RPC endpoint mapper client authentication is set to enabled. I think, what was her name? Kayla was on talking about the mapper client in a previous week's episode, but Marty, talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, good old RPC, remote procedure call. That's been that again. There's that word remote again. Kind of like the Princess Bride. You keep saying that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. But unfortunately, in this one, it does. It's a Microsoftish thing. It's been there. It's the way that they do everything. It's how they do GPO updates. It's how they push. How you can see the computer. So RPC should be protected by by an army of machine gun welding goats to, because it really can be exploited. Same thing with this. I don't know who you are. I'm not going to let you do any RPC calls to me. You need to tell me who you are at the very least.
Yep. And that actually segues to the next setting here. So restrict unauthenticated RPC clients, set to enabled authenticated, which again, restrict and enabled, right? Read the GPO. Be careful when you go through this. CIS gives it laid out for you with a reason.
Yep. Just like Reagan said, trust but verify.
I like that.
Trust but verify.
I love that.
Awesome. Let's I think, did you have anything more to add on this? I feel like you summed up both settings in your last.
No, again, so if I don't know who you are, you're not going to be let in. Yep.
Awesome.
I like it.
All right, let's get into this next setting here with the Microsoft Support Diagnostic Tool. So turn on the Diagnostics tool, interactive communication with support provider. CIS recommends disabled. Microsoft doesn't need that type of access. They don't need that information. Why do we care if Microsoft has it or not? Why is this interesting?
Well, the government trusts Microsoft. That means everybody should, right?
Right.
It really comes down. One thing I say challenge that, but I'll say ask a lot of our viewers here that watch this now or later too, is take a server or a workstation, just a default server or workstation, and whenever you install it, go ahead and install it, and then turn around and use a tool like SysTools TCP View or something of that nature, and just look at how many connections it makes outside your network, and it will scare you. I mean, it has a port open here, a port open here, a port open here, and the thing is all of these are active, maintained open sessions. And
Marty, it'd be interesting to just configure a system with no data on it, just a bare server, if you will, with out of the box settings, and just see how long before it gets taken over.
Exactly right. Yeah. And because it's crazy the amount, and of course, this is one of those settings there, Zach, is, again, Microsoft Support Diagnostics Tool, it connects to Microsoft. Okay. So we'll trust Microsoft because, they're a big company. They deal with the government. So we'll trust them, but we're still going to verify. We're still going to verify who they are. And to me, disabling this is that verification. It's like, okay, I trust you, but I don't need this. I don't need you to do this for me. So my verification is I'm just going to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can enable it when this time comes up that I do need it.
Yeah. Well,
if never, right?
Well, it goes into something that's completely IT related, but very simple, very, very similar. Is look at Toyota, for example. I have a friend of mine that works at the Toyota plant up in Georgetown, and he works in the division that orders all the parts and stuff for everything. They do what's called just-in-time manufacturing. Is they get a delivery that day, that part is used that day. They get delivered tomorrow, that part's used tomorrow. And so that way, of course, it goes into inventory control and a few other things too. But it's basically, I only get it when I need it. And same thing here. A lot of these settings are okay, depending upon how you're using them, but only enable them when you need them enabled. And then once you've used it and you've gotten your support and gotten your help, now disable it. And don't keep it just out there.
Perfect. Awesome. Let's go to this next setting here. Again, this is going to have to do with system performance. So enable or disable the perf track. CIS does recommend to have this to disabled. This one's a little confusing to me. I feel like this would be interesting data for the MSP to have. Is it just there's better ways to get this, or what's the problem? Why is this recommended to be disabled?
It just comes down to it has to store those files. And of course, it will compress them and things like that. Doesn't take up space, but it is also an additional resources running. It's taking up about a gig of RAM or so, and it just comes down to is the reasonings there is just kind of data privacy. Hey, why, unless I have a reason. And it really, that's a big thing when it comes to any security thing is why are we doing this? If we can't answer the question over why we're doing this, and then even if we have an answer to why we're doing this, well, is the why worth or is the why a good enough answer to still do it?
To accept the risk.
Accept the risk. Is it an acceptable risk? Exactly. And the same thing here. Is it an acceptable risk from a standpoint? Now, is this a security risk? Not necessarily, but it's a privacy risk because it is tracking everything. It's that's happening in your computers from a performance standpoint. not necessarily sensitive data, but then it goes back to the, well, again, why have it running if it's not needed?
Yep. Perfect. All right. We only have 3 settings here, and the last 2 actually tie together. So let's get on into the turn off the advertising ID set to enabled. I feel like this is more about user privacy more than anything else. But talk to us about this.
Everything. You know, when you set up Windows, it goes through and it says, do you want advertising? Do you want this? Do you want that?
You always click yes, right? You just tell Microsoft yes.
Always. And I put my social security number in there at the same time. Everything.
Right next to the credit card.
To the credit card number, yeah. And then the next page is where the checking account goes in. But yeah, I mean, I slide all that off. I mean, because, you know, I saw this meme once I thought was hilarious. Basically, as a guy, he was acting all depressed, and he goes, "No one ever listens to me." And then the next slide behind him, it had a picture of Google and Facebook, and it goes, "We do, we listen to you." And you know, it really is that thing here. You know, you don't realize that you're giving your personal information to, you know, or even anonymous usage information, because great. Mm-hmm. They say it's anonymous usage. We don't know who you are. No, you know who I am. I mean, it's that simple. You have my IP address, you have my key, you have this, you have that. And every time I go to a site, you may not know that my name is Marty Godsey, but you know that my Windows key is this and my IP address is this, which directly will tie back to me somehow in some form or fashion. And so any site that I go to, I'm also going to get pop-ups for this product. Oh my gosh, I looked at that site 3 months ago, one time for 2 seconds. And now I'm getting ads for it. So that's really where this comes into play. And that's why, again, it just goes into privacy. Just turn it really the premise of what kind of we're ranting about today is if it's not needed, turn it off, is really the simple answer to all of this. If it's not needed, turn it off.
Don't need that.
Yep.
It's
that's spot on.
You're advertising the address of your front door.
Exactly right. They don't know that the front door belongs to Rich McGraw, but they know where that front door is and that someone lives there.
Right. And that's enough sometimes.
And all the data points make up a picture eventually. Yep. So that is very good. These last 2 settings here, so they are going to have to do with that NTP client or server setting. So we'll do this first one here. Yep. And it says to actually enable Windows NTP client set to enabled. And previewing this next setting, we're actually going to talk about enable Windows NTP server to disabled. Yep. Sounds contradictory, but different settings. Talk to us a little bit about this.
Sure. We get client and server. NTP is has a client server functionality, and of course the client is exactly what it says. Hey, I'm going to go out and grab my time from something, a trusted source, be it Microsoft, be it Google, wherever you want to use for your Strata, your NTP Stratas. It's a trusted source, so you're setting your clock to that. Well, you don't want to necessarily be having that for anybody else. That's where the NTP server comes into play. If you start NTP server, well, now you're an authoritative timekeeper that other people can look to. Are there reasons to do that? Some regards, absolutely. Like a quick example is XCP-ng, a hypervisor for time frame, right? NTP. Regardless of what time it is, you want all the machines in that cluster to have the same time. So what you generally do, a best practice, is you have an NTP server running on the master node, and then all the client hosts look at that master server. That way they're all in sync. They could be off by 3 hours and 20 seconds, but they're all off by 3 hours and 20 seconds, which means functionally they'll be okay. But for the most part, you don't need your workstation acting as an NTP server, number one. Domain controllers, that's where your time is going to come from in a domain. You're going to look at your domain controllers for that. So yeah, disable the setting. Since again, it's not needed. You don't need to be an NTP server for anybody. Client, different story.
Yep. And we can just show that last slide. So we have it on the recording, because these do go to YouTube after. And soon enough, as soon as my bandwidth allows, we'll have little reels calling out these settings individually.
Oh, nice.
I think that'll be a lot easier for our audience to find the exact setting they're looking for instead of scrolling through. But we'll see where it leads. Hopefully there's good things about it. But Marty, that was the last setting. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being a guest. As always, I like to give the last couple minutes time back to you. Is there any kind of closing thoughts or anything you want to bring up to talk about before we conclude here?
Oh, not any other topic. I will leave with this. I was just thinking about this just a couple of moments ago. I'm an old fart. Yeah, I guess in this industry, I've been in it for 30 years.
Don't think about that. You're
Same, bro.
young to
Yeah, I
us.
see the white here, right? But at the end of the day, cybersecurity or security of anything, cybersecurity or things like that, is 70% common sense. It really is. And it goes back to, if you don't need it, turn it off. Would you leave every light in your house on just because, hey, I got my bedroom light on, it's 3 floors up, I'll be up there to go to bed in about 4 or 5 hours? Well, why do you have the light on? I mean, so it really is common sense. You think about it from a common standpoint of, do I need this right now, or do I need it ever? And if the answer is no, then you either turn it off or you do something to where it's not not an exposure. So just that's what and it's the old KISS method: keep it simple, stupid. Right? I think a lot of people add a complexity into places just for the sake of it being complex. Kind of like when and I'll finish that. I won't go too long. You expect people, oh, how's things been going? Oh man, I've been busy. I've been really busy and great. Well, have you really been busy, or you're saying you've just been busy for busy's sake?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. What's that?
2 different things, right?
Two different things. I mean, I can say, oh man, gosh, Zach, I've been slammed this week, but honestly, I've sat here for the past 3 hours and played Halo. So
a true security
professional, exactly. And it goes into, I think, into complexity. Is when you introduce complexity, you also introduce support issues. You introduce potentially more things to worry, more question, everything. Keep it simple, because in many ways, the simplest thing is the most secure way. I have a T-shirt. I can't wear it anymore, but I have a T-shirt that it says 100% effective firewall. And you know what it was? It was a pair of wire cutters. I mean, of course, you got wireless these days, but the point of the picture was, if I'm not connected, I'm good. And so it's what it is. It's a lot of just common sense. Just use common sense, and you're going to get so far down the road of protecting your environments. And then keep it simple.
Love that, Marty.
I think that's a great conclusion. And I think you might have had a chance to meet her, but Jen White, she was the guest last week, and her opening statements echoed your closing statements. So we really are complicating things in this day and age. And that's where CIS, you just need to look at a standard, really understand, is it about the process? Is it about the tool? A lot of times for these best practices, a tool isn't necessarily necessary. No. But a lot of times it can help automate the process if it's the right tool. Follow a standard. Don't make it too hard. Check mark the boxes as you go through and verify their complete.
Exactly.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Rich, we get the next month off. I don't know if I told you that. We're taking a holiday break.
Hey.
Oh, man.
I may need to generate some new DALL-E images for these slides. And,
I like those. They had a real spiritual vibe this time, Zach.
I should have said put a Christmas theme. I should start making the visuals for the time of year.
Exactly.
Dude, we're going to have to do a couple Zoom calls or something, because I need you, bro.
We can still hang out offline, but yep, we will hopefully come back. I'm tentatively scheduling for January 17th to be our return episode, but I am building out that guest list right now, getting the presentations ready, so it may be closer to February. We will see how the bandwidth plays out. Marketing, shout out to everyone who's in marketing. Your job is harder than everyone else's. All right. Really appreciate being here. We do have our CIS Unlocked newsletter series. We do provide a deep dive into the episode and the overview of the slides. And as always, myself and Rich are open to connecting on LinkedIn. Reach out. We're always around. And if you do want to give Senteon a whirl, you can go to the next slide. Feel free to scan the QR code and see where you line up against the CIS benchmarks. Look at your best practices. Look at your settings. See where you can improve. So happy to provide that, a little gift from us to you. So thank you for being here, and we will see you after the new year.